Alright, so today I want to talk about coming to terms with evil. Um, so I think it's pretty important to, you know, realize early on that I guess good and bad are here to stay. And they're just one of those things that imply each other. Just like light and dark, they go together. And you can obviously see that. Um, so I believe that being able to understand that it's about a balance between these two forces that are never going to be separated because they are fundamental to our existence. So we wouldn't be able to perceive a universe in which those conditions weren't met. So we need light and dark, hot and cold, good and evil. But they're really only perceptions of one thing on a continuum. Sorry, train's going off, but there's one single thing on a continuum. A continuum is an infinite scale. Um, so continuum basically, so you have two more or less poles, not really poles, just points maybe perhaps, and between them is a continuum. And on this continuum, there are the two ends of the spectrum that you see, but it is on the infinite scale. So it's not disconnected, it is connected, but there appears to be a separation via consciousness because we create that differentiation. Because we are soft, things are hard, and because things are hard, other things are soft. It's just in relation to those things, do we have any experience at all? So, coming to terms with evil, I think, is a really important thing because throughout this journey is long, and you're going to see a lot of evil because it is the nature of a human being that is disconnected from who they are, would want to harm others and make it, not really wonderful and habitable for people to have a great time and just live and coexist peacefully. Hi, kitty. But I think that evil is something that's not going away, or at least our perception of evil. But what I really think is important is that we ourselves have to realize that evil is part of the growth. Like, you don't get the tree without a couple dead branches. It's the rot, it's the ever fascinating, or ever persistent degeneration of things around us. The need for life and death. They constitute each other. They are necessary to each other's existence, that those two things are existent. So there's so many of these examples that constitute our being, and they are on a sort of just one, I don't even want to say unit, just one would probably suffice, just on a one of sorts, and they connect to each other in an infinite scale forever and ever and ever, and we are it, that the universe is essentially, we are it. So, but I think that the really important thing is realizing that you are the good and the bad, and that it is you providing what you need through whatever means that you can externally. And you don't want to throw you around too much because you're not trying to formulate any concepts, but realizing that, the outside world, you don't control your hair growing or any of those unconscious functions. You don't control those, just like you don't control the flow of water. You don't control the rotation of the planets. It's out of your hands. And it's like the rest of that is in control, not necessarily being controlled, or not even really being controlled, period. I don't even know if control is the right word. They're simply being. And they're connected to a one. I've tried to do as good as I can to remove as many labels as possible and concepts, because they're all really insufficient, period, because they only really point to things. But coming to terms with evil is something that I think most people that are on a spiritual journey or on a life journey, period, really need to assess, because you're going to see it, and there's a couple of different ways you can deal with it. And this is probably not a complete list, but you can deal with it by, being ignorant if you choose. Not ignorant in the sense that you are a stupid person. Ignorant in the sense that you ignore the facts because you just prefer to not assess them. But you're going to encounter evil people and evil things in your life. And what you do with that energy is really entirely up to you. You can harbor that hate for them and hold a grudge, which causes, emotional blockages that you'll hold around for years, making yourself suffer, because they're no longer there when you carry that suffering for them. You create the life inside of that emotion. Like, without your participation, there's all you do is watch it. So, you're basically forcing yourself to watch a movie over and over again. And I particularly do not like to watch movies more than one time. Maybe over some time I'll watch them again. But, that's just, for old time's sake. Just like I probably would with memories. I would experience them, put them away, experience them later, one time, maybe a couple times, whenever they come up. But the thing is, it's how much are we willing to let these negative experiences control our lives? So, I think it's really important that you have to look at evil with as if it holds all the good in equilibrium. You need to see it as it constitutes it. Because without evil there'd be no good. You wouldn't know what you meant. It's like it's light to its dark. It needs the contrast between those two things. So you can't be so fixated on evil, and you can't be too fixated on being good. Because you and I are constructed the same material, and we are imbued with the ability to be the most human, beautiful, amazing, sharing, compassionate beings. And then we also have the capabilities to commit the most horrible atrocities. So you have to realize that we are both sides of heaven's battle. And we solely are responsible for the condition that the earth is in, the state that we find ourselves each and every day, and also globally. It is a collective decision that we continue to make every day, progressively, more and more. We decide to make these decisions, which we believe that we must hold tight to the way things have been and resist change. But in reality, all things change. Everything is impermanent. And everything that persists is something that you're watching claw itself as far away into the light and away from the ever-encroaching darkness. That's just how it goes. All of the things that are surviving are just facing the light for as long as they can before they too perish away. Because nothing really lasts in it. It's kind of like a burst of intelligent thought. And it I want to address the fact that nothing I say should ever be believed entirely. It should be scrutinized heavily. And I want my listeners to talk about things and to expose things that they believe are not true or true. I will accept a small bit of rudeness, but I will respond more, and I will respect and give real, passionate answers to people who are slower and more respectful, because I don't believe that it's a good way to communicate with people by trying to angrily fight about a viewpoint. That's not the goal. If you have something to say, please say it kindly and state clear what your purpose is and intent. If you can, please, reference the frame of what you're talking about. Don't just spout off some nonsense without telling me what exactly you're referring to that I said, because then there's no way I can interpret that I would have guesses that would all be far off. So, now that we got that out of the way, I had this really weird thought that I just want to throw out there for some listeners that might enjoy this one. So, I was thinking, everything seems to have like these, it just rolls like two different ways. And I mean, you can call it duality, polarity, I don't know, but I don't really want to believe any of those things. I just hear about them. But it seems that like you have space and solids in space, right? Like, and it seems that they're integral to each other. Like, you wouldn't have objects if you didn't have space to put the objects in. You wouldn't have space unless you had some objects to put in those space, something to contrast it. So it seems that it constitutes itself, like that's how I feel. So when I look at consciousness, it also kind of appears kind of curious. And before I go into that, I want to go into silence. Like, you have silence, and it's kind of that background that allows for the sound to come out of something. There's a nothingness, and then there's a somethingness. And it's like consciousness. You have the blank background that can be empty for moments when you're sleeping. It can be blank when you're meditating. It can be blank any of times. Maybe you're daydreaming, who knows? But your mind can have moments of blankness, but behind it always needs that blankness to constitute the thought. And it's like the thought seems like the space, the thought seems like the matter to the space inside of your head. And it also is like the sound to the silence, like the background of your consciousness, like the stream of awareness that isn't being used up by speech, and not when you're away from that, when you're not talking or conceptualizing, when that's not happening. You're in a state of experiencing pure awareness. And it's like, that's the two, like, it's just kind of weird. I just thought of the thought as matter in space, and it just kind of, I don't know, it just thought, it felt interesting, almost like a realization, but I didn't want to, I don't try to cling too tight to any of these things. I just remember them, and I always want to pass them by some people and hear what they think about them, because I feel like maybe they have some truth, but they also have extremely detrimental falses somewhere in them, in different places. So it's better to be able to talk openly about these different things, to perhaps bring them forth from the darkness and make them something that can be communicated, rather than us turning our faces away from what we should talk about. Because the real problem, I believe, is we can't begin to have the conversation. And, it's mostly rooted in social stigma and, conditioning and the way the world works. But in reality, we can't have the real conversations we need. Because what it's always going to come down to, as long as the system is alive and awake, is that the people that make money are going to continue to want to make money. So at most costs, they will be willing to earn that, and they will put it over the well-being of other people. But until we realize that we are cells to a body, and the earth is our body,